All right, everyone, we need to talk immediately because the weather models just dropped something that's going to change everything we thought we knew about the next 2 weeks.
This isn't speculation anymore. What I'm seeing in today's data is a complete pattern shift that could deliver the major snowstorms we've been tracking for weeks. After days of showing cold and dry conditions, the models have suddenly shifted to something much more exciting for snow lovers across the eastern states. Before we dive into this evolving pattern, drop your exact location in the comments. This new development could affect regions that haven't seen significant snow all winter. What I'm about to reveal explains why Arctic air moving in after this weekend could create the snowstorm connection many of you have been hoping for. The biggest question mark has been whether this cold air would connect with storm systems to produce snow or just give us a relatively cold and dry pattern. Today's model runs have taken significant steps toward a much snowier outlook compared to yesterday's runs that showed almost no storm connection. We're going to break down exactly what to expect for your area, including the timing of this Arctic air and the potential snowfall events you need to watch. Starting with the European model, we can see that today feels absolutely beautiful. The kind of weather that makes you want to spend time outdoors. In the comments right now, tell me what temperature you're experiencing today and whether you're enjoying this calm before the potential pattern change. Mid-60s temperatures across much of the region feel amazing, and we're actually expecting even warmer 70-degree weather later this week. Moving into Wednesday, we still see a relatively dry pattern with mild temperatures continuing across the central and eastern states. Most current weather activity remains focused in the northwest with some snowfall, plus a storm system near the southwest bringing mainly rainfall. The northeast has a minor low-pressure system offshore of New England, creating some lighter snowfall or mixed precipitation for southern New England. But here's where everything starts to change. Thursday the 8th brings something significant that begins reorganizing the entire weather pattern. We see a substantial low forming over the center of the United States, and this is a massive feature that will impact weather patterns nationwide. Behind this system, a cold air mass develops, leading to considerable snowfall for mountainous western areas and Arctic air beginning to move southward. Ahead of this low, we get a warm front that creates a warm, humid environment underneath and ahead of the system. This setup becomes important because it's creating some of the ingredients needed for potential winter weather as the pattern continues evolving. Friday brings a more active phase of this transition, with the warm front drawing additional moisture northward into the developing system. By Friday evening, we're looking at thunderstorm activity developing across portions of the southeast as this weather pattern intensifies. Areas like Alabama, Georgia, South Carolina, Tennessee, Kentucky, Virginia, and West Virginia could see thunderstorm chances as this system becomes more active. The thunderstorm potential looks most likely for Alabama, Georgia, and South Carolina, though we'll need to monitor details as we get closer to the event. Share in the comments which of these states you're in and whether you typically prepare differently for January thunderstorms versus summer storms. Saturday night into Sunday marks an important transition when the cold front moves through and the pattern begins its shift. You might hear some thunder or experience heavier rain overnight Saturday into Sunday as this system progresses eastward. By Sunday the 11th, we're looking at a reorganized pattern with warmer conditions out west and colder air becoming established in the east. A strong low-pressure system over northern Canada begins enhancing snow shower activity and lake effect snow around the Great Lakes. Monday the 12th continues this west warm, east cold pattern that could set the stage for interesting winter weather possibilities. Wednesday the 14th brings another upper-level low over Michigan, creating widespread snow shower activity near the Great Lakes region. Here's where it gets particularly interesting. We start seeing the vertical jet stream configuration that creates favorable conditions for coastal storms. This jet stream pattern takes a more direct path up the East Coast, which historically has been associated with significant winter weather events. Some low pressure appears in this area initially, but it's not immediately coming together in a way that would produce major impacts. However, if this type of system were to organize more effectively, it could create noteworthy snow potential for parts of the eastern United States. The models begin showing better organization possibilities around the 15th into the 16th, which puts us at about 10 days out. At the 10-day range, we need to focus on pattern trends rather than specific details. But the overall setup is becoming more interesting for winter weather. The challenge is always timing. Some cold air could move offshore while low-pressure systems remain too far from the coast to produce significant precipitation. Tell me in the comments which scenario interests you more, a quieter, cold and dry pattern, or the potential for more active winter weather. At 10 days out, these details can certainly change, but the broader pattern signals are what we focus on for understanding potential. We have the vertical jet stream positioning up the East Coast, cold air becoming available, and storm systems developing along the jet stream. These represent important ingredients for coastal winter weather, so monitoring how this pattern evolves becomes quite interesting. The key question remains whether these systems stay offshore as non-events or whether they develop into something more significant for eastern areas. Both scenarios remain possibilities at this point for the mid-January timeframe, which is what makes this pattern worth watching closely. Let's examine what this pattern change means for temperature trends across different regions over the coming weeks. The contrast between western warmth and eastern cooling becomes more pronounced as we move through this weather pattern transition. Major cities across the Northeast and Mid-Atlantic should expect a noticeable temperature change after experiencing this week's pleasant conditions. Boston, New York City, Philadelphia, and Washington, D.C. will all experience this shift, from spring-like warmth to more typical January temperatures. The timing of when colder air arrives becomes important for determining how it might interact with any moisture in the atmosphere. Chicago, Detroit, Cleveland, and Pittsburgh represent areas where temperature contrast often create interesting weather situations. Drop your city in the comments if you're in any of these areas and tell me what type of January weather you prefer to experience. The Northern Plains and Upper Midwest, including Minneapolis, Madison, Milwaukee, and Green Bay, typically handle colder patterns quite well. These regions often see more consistent winter conditions and could experience multiple snow events as weather systems move through the established cold pattern. Meanwhile, cities like Atlanta, Charlotte, Nashville, and Louisville sit in transition zones where temperature changes tend to be more dramatic. The jet stream positioning will determine whether these areas see mainly rain and thunderstorms or potentially some winter weather elements. As storm systems move through the southeast, the temperature contrast this pattern creates could help strengthen these weather systems. Looking at precipitation patterns, we see some interesting differences between the major forecast models for this time frame. The European model shows good activity for the Cascades and Rockies, but notably less action for the Sierra Nevada mountain range. There's increased precipitation potential for the northern plains, upper Midwest, Great Lakes, and interior Northeast regions. However, the European model shows more limited activity for the Mid-Atlantic and southern New England areas during this time frame. The GFS model paints a somewhat different picture, showing more substantial precipitation possibilities throughout Mid-Atlantic and Northeast regions. In contrast, the GFS gives the northern plains and upper Midwest less precipitation than what the European model projects. This type of disagreement between major models is completely normal for longer-range forecast and shows why we focus on broader patterns. Comment below and tell me which aspects of weather forecasting interest you most when models show different solutions. The broader pattern elements like temperature trends, jet stream positioning, and timing of weather system development are more reliable at this range. These pattern-level details provide the foundation for understanding what types of weather become possible rather than exact specifics. For questions about whether specific areas will see particular weather events, we typically need to be much closer to the time frame. Generally, we need to be within 10 days and often within 7 days to get higher confidence in location-specific weather predictions. This is why pattern recognition becomes valuable for understanding developing potential rather than expecting precise details far in advance. The pattern we're tracking has elements that could support interesting winter weather, but the exact details remain to be determined. For those in smaller communities that don't always get mentioned in broader weather discussions, drop your location below. Viewers in rural areas, mountain communities, and smaller cities often provide valuable insights about local weather patterns and impacts. These communities sometimes experience different impacts from major pattern changes compared to larger metropolitan areas. The combination of Arctic air potential, active weather systems, and favorable atmospheric patterns creates opportunities for notable weather events. Whether we see frequent, smaller events or fewer but more significant ones depends on how these various pattern elements come together. The next several days will help clarify how this pattern evolution progresses as we approach the weekend weather system. Share in the comments what type of weather pattern you're hoping to see develop and what would be ideal for your area. Are you looking forward to the potential for more active winter weather, or are you hoping this milder pattern continues a bit longer? These types of pattern shifts often create some of the most interesting winter weather situations, especially when timing aligns well. The science behind these patterns involves watching how small changes in atmospheric positioning can create quite different outcomes. As we continue monitoring this evolution, remember that pattern changes like this can sometimes develop more quickly than initially expected. The interaction between cold air masses and active storm systems often produces the most memorable winter weather experiences. Let me know in the comments which specific aspects of this pattern development interest you most and what questions you have. Understanding these atmospheric patterns helps us appreciate the complexity of weather science while preparing appropriately for potential impacts. The transition from this week's mild temperatures to the potential Arctic pattern creates conditions that could support significant weather events. Whether you enjoy winter weather or prefer milder conditions, this pattern evolution will likely affect everyone across the eastern United States. The timing of this potential transition aligns with the period when East Coast winter weather events historically become more possible. January and February often produce notable winter weather when atmospheric patterns align in favorable configurations like we're seeing develop. We're approaching the window when these pattern setups can sometimes deliver the winter weather events that become locally significant. The important thing is monitoring how quickly this pattern establishes and whether storm systems can effectively utilize any available cold air. Tell me one more time in the comments, what would be your preferred weather scenario for your area over the next couple of weeks? Your local perspectives help create a more complete understanding of how different regions experience these broader pattern changes. As this pattern continues developing, we'll watch for the subtle changes that could significantly influence winter weather potential. Sometimes the difference between notable weather and near misses comes down to small shifts in timing or atmospheric positioning. This is why understanding broader pattern trends becomes more valuable than focusing too heavily on specific details when looking ahead. The foundation is developing for potentially interesting winter weather, and now we monitor to see how effectively these elements organize. Continue following daily forecast updates as we get closer to key time frames, because patterns like this can sometimes change rapidly. Thank you for joining me for this analysis of what could develop into a notable pattern change for much of the eastern United States. If you found this breakdown helpful, please hit that like button to help others discover this weather pattern analysis. Your engagement helps reach other weather enthusiasts who want to understand these developing atmospheric patterns. Make sure to stay tuned for updates as we continue tracking this interesting pattern evolution that could affect winter weather potential. Leave a comment below with your location and what type of weather you're hoping to see. Every perspective adds value to our weather community discussion.